Welcome out, everybody, to Three Martini Solution Podcast, Episode 6. We're here with myself, Ryan, Casey, and Jessica. Emily's not here with us today. And we are going to get into talking about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial. And I thought this was a good one to get into because I have personally litigated defamation cases. Casey, have you?
Once.
Okay. Well, I don't have I was mainly on the defense side of them and a plaintiff side once, but that never went to trial. And when I was I'm sorry, what was that?
I was on the plaintiff's side.
Yeah, so when I was on the plaintiff side of it, we got it settled. We got it resolved before actual trial to the client's pleasure. But several times I was on the defense side of it and always got those kicked out because they're actually pretty difficult cases to prove and to be successful in. I think a lot of people, when they hear like defamation cases, they're thinking, oh, I think that's maybe the thing that goes through a lot of people's mind when they think about suing somebody, like, oh, so-and-so said this to me, I'm going to sue them, right? And they don't realize how difficult it actually is to win one of those things. So I thought maybe I'll start off by going through a little bit about defamation in general, talk a little bit about the case, and then we can get into it. So in Casey, when I heard about this case or was looking at it, the first thing I thought of is next semester when those first year law students are going through their torts class, this is going to be the case, right? This is going to be the case they discuss because this is a great defamation case, I think, from a law student standpoint, so I'm sure there's tort professors across the country just, as happy as can be about this case. So Jessica, you're a non-lawyer here.
Perfect.
Did you know that there was two different kinds of defamation cases? And I have to admit,
I did not, but I definitely have wanted to sue a lot of people.
See, I told you. Yeah, this is what people think about. I'm going to sue you. You can't say that about me. I'm going to sue you. So, and stop me if I'm saying anything wrong here, Casey. But generally speaking, so defamation is really one of two things. Or combination. Slander, which is I said something about you, or libel, I wrote something about you. It typically needs to be false, right? It has to be published in some sort of way. So if I am just talking with you one-on-one, Jessica, and I'm like, you are an idiot, I hate you, you're whatever. But it's just between me and you, is not going to happen. But if I say it in front of Casey, then that has been a third-party communication. That's one of the elements you need for it. Then you have to at least be negligent in what you're saying, so it can't be, you kind of have to know what you're doing or just don't care about what you're doing to a certain degree. And then there needs to be some sort of damages, right? You have to be injured by it some way. And but when there's a couple of different factors that pop up when you're famous and like a movie actor or like a political person or somebody who's in the public eye, there's an elevated standard, right? So if you are Johnny Depp and you're claiming him or your Amber Heard, an actress, are defaming you, you have to prove that that famous person has to prove that it's done with actual malice, which means, here, I wrote it down because I would always forget, that it was said with knowledge that it was false, or with reckless disregard of whether it was the truth. And this is and it has to be proven to a higher standard than you would normally prove a case if it was just two schmucks who aren't famous on any level, right? And so that's what happened. So I think that's probably going to come into play. I haven't read the thing that I was saying, I have to confess to, is I haven't really dug into the actual case other than seeing what they've put on TV, right? Or, clips from the internet. So I haven't read any of the court papers, but I'm just going to assume that actual malice is part of one of the things they have to prove there. And the other part of it, which I think may be a factor in this case, is a slightly different kind of defamation case, which is defamation per se, which essentially means that you've said something. There's certain things you can say that are so harmful that essentially you don't have to prove damages at all, which I'll get into in a second. But this would be something like if you say somebody's a criminal or have committed a criminal act, they have like a sexually transmitted disease, or they're like just really crappy at their job. They're like unable to do their job. Like, I don't know, I can say about a doctor, like this doctor is, I think he's the worst doctor in the world, blah, blah, blah. But if you say you shouldn't go see this doctor because they cheated to get through medical school. All right. All of a sudden, that's an elevated sort of standard. And you don't even have to, and if you're the plaintiff in that case, the one who claims that they were defamed, you don't even have to prove damages. And I think that's important because when I've dealt with it, or when I've consulted with people about whether they want to sue about defamation cases, is do you have any damages at all? And then I usually would go into do you really want your life being played out in a court of law? Because it will be. Right. Whether you're the plaintiff or you're the defendant, it is probably going to all get laid out there.
But Ryan,
yeah.
What if you anticipate damages? Like, this is going to impact my profession and my ability to get new patients or referrals, like you anticipate it.
Right. And so since the rise of like social media and like things like Yelp in particular, I think that's been more of a big issue because somebody goes on and leaves you a nasty Yelp review. And you're like, that never happened. That was untrue. Like, do you have a case against them? But it's just there, and there are ways to do it. It's just harder to prove your damages at that point. Now, I think in the Johnny Depp case, it gets a little bit easier because he lost employment that he could. It appears he lost employment that he could tie directly to the statements from Amber Heard or the allegations from Amber Heard in that op-ed that she did. So
yeah, I think the interesting thing about the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, though, is it's more than just, well, there's two interesting things, because it's more than just a defamation case, right? Mm-hmm. On one hand, the reason why you'd have to do actual malice is because the public, for famous people, has an interest in, like, they have an interest in knowing what's going on in their lives, which makes sense for politicians. I'm not sure it makes as much sense for movie stars or whatever, which is an interesting question. But I think the other part is what you see is a really interesting PR war where they become proxies for other things, right?
Right.
It's like, Amber Heard was obviously physically injured by Johnny Depp. And so she becomes an emblem of certain segments of of society, like any woman who's ever been, physically assaulted by a man that they're romantically involved in. There you go. And of course, like with all these cases, it's more complicated because it's two humans, right? And he also was physically injured and different things. So it's a hot mess everywhere. But what happens is, because they become these icons, then all of a sudden everybody uses them as a proxy, and they're all exactly like all of us. We haven't read all of the court filings, so we don't know exactly what happened. So what are we going to do? We're going to, talk about it and see because it becomes something in some ways larger than itself as we talk about it, right? Are you on Johnny Depp's side? Are you on Amber Heard's side? Like, I saw something the other day, which is fascinating, because they're like, ooh, Jason Momoa has now weighed in on whose side he was on. Because, he was in Aquaman with Amber Heard, so of course they're BFFs, except for, wait for it, he just followed Johnny Depp on Instagram.
Oh my gosh. Well, case closed.
Right. That's the new world we're in, right? Like, who you follow Instagram, like there are people who spend all day checking
Mm-hmm.
and comparing the Instagram follower list or whatever. I'm sure there's a bot for it or something like that, but like that's a big deal.
Right.
Like who follows whom. That's how you know when celebrities break up with each other. Like Shawn Mendes, when he breaks up, you know, because all of a sudden their social medias are like, because it's a branding issue. Anyway, that's where I think it's super interesting, because Johnny Depp and Amber Heard can work out their things.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
And I want to get in and talk more.
Physically help anybody, but when all the talking we're doing about it, that's more interesting.
Yes. Yes. Well, and so Jessica, you may not know this. Casey knows this. Before you even start the trial, they have already submitted to the judge what they think the instructions from the judge should be to the jury. So they say, hey, judge, here's how we think you should instruct the jury about the case. And that's where they set out the elements of the case. And so they've already made a decision at this point whether it's going to be defamation per se, how actual malice is going to be applied, or if it's not going to be applied. That's already been out there. So I want to say that information is probably out there if I want to bother and go read it. But that's not the interesting part, right? The interesting part is all this other stuff, I think, about it. But just a brief overcap. So some of the defenses, I don't know if you ever thought about defending yourself in a defamation case, or Jessica, but so if what the person said is true, you're gonna lose your defamation case.
That's the best defense and the one that's most often forgotten.
Right. Absolutely.
Things when you said that and you're like, but it's true. But you still should pay for hurting my feelings.
Right.
Right.
I didn't want you to say it. So, and another is a statement of opinion, right? So, if I say, well, I think Casey's an idiot, that's my opinion. Somebody listening to that says, well, I know Casey. I don't think Casey's an idiot. That must be Ryan's opinion. But that sort of language that we use colloquially when we're talking to each other out here in the real world is understood by the courts as, an average somebody who is hearing this being said is going to recognize that as a statement of opinion. Like that, it's when.
So do you think one of the biggest hangups then with that is the fact that she didn't name him in that article? Like the fact, like just because we can put two and two together, but she never actually names him. So is that going to be a hard piece to get over?
I think that, so I didn't know, apparently the ACLU helped her craft the statement. Is that right? I guess I didn't read it. I don't follow as closely as maybe I should, or, in preparation for this, but I think she had help crafting it. And maybe that was part of like, well, let's just not name him and maybe that'll soften it a bit. But she mentioned, their relationship is just public, right? It's so public that they knew that when they got divorced in 2016, and she talks about this happening, incidents happening in 2016. So it doesn't take a rocket science to put two and two together. It is something that maybe they will, once her team goes out there to try to prove their case, will focus on. But it's not naming him if you're vague enough. Like, I once knew a person, sometime in my life, and they did this. It's like, well, how are you going to connect that to anybody specifically? But, if I was like, well, one of my siblings, who's the youngest sibling, said to me, blah, 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 and she's blah, blah, blah. Well, if you know my family, then my youngest sibling is Jessica. So it's easier to draw that together. So I think
if you just did a little research, you could figure it out.
Yeah, nominal amount of research. And I think if you're, if you didn't know who she was married to in 2016, you say Amber Heard 2016, and it's Johnny Depp. So it wouldn't take much to figure it out. But it could be something that plays a factor into it for sure. So truth, or the statement of opinion, is something that can be a defense to it. If for some reason I said, oh yeah, go ahead, say that, see if I care. You could have maybe consented to the statement being made. Then there's certain things like if somebody says something in court or part of a court proceeding, then that would be a defense, which is interesting. And again, this is my lack of knowledge about the case, but she countersued him for $100 million defamation based on what his attorney said about her. But do you know, either one of you, whether they said that in court or out of court? No? Okay.
No.
So the difference, Jessica, would be if I'm in court, I'm talking to the judge or I'm talking to the jury, and I say, Jessica's a liar, that's going to be a protected thing because the court wants people in the court talking freely about whatever. So that's going to be a protected statement. But if I walk out into the hallway and say, Jessica's a liar, and a bunch of people hear it, that's not going to be protected. So I don't know if that's going to play a role in this one. There's something called a qualified privilege. So if I'm, you say something in your own self-defense, or you do something where you're criticizing. So like if I read a book and I'm like, this is the biggest piece of garbage in the world, but it's a piece of criticism that people recognize as criticism, it almost says, okay, well, that's protected. It's kind of similar to opinion. But if you like retracted it, like, if I said something bad about you and then you're like, that's not true. And I'm like, oh, I talked to Jessica. She sent me the information. It's not true. I retract it. It supposedly then is a defense that you can use. One of the other things that I ran into a lot when I was looking at defending some of these cases is things when people say, just kind of grandiose thing. This is the worst person I've ever met. Just kind of over the top, sort of obtuse sort of statements. Bombastic sort of statements. The courts recognize that a lot of times is by like, no, somebody listening to that understands that you don't really mean this is the worst person in the world or whatever. This is just kind of an over exaggeration, and people are allowed to do that. So, but yeah, so the case, as we kind of already mentioned, the case comes up based on, they get divorced in 2016. There's all these crazy allegations. I don't know if everybody's favorite allegation, but one of the most surprising allegations is she crapped in his bed. Like
that slippery whore. That's my favorite thing to come out of all of it.
Right.
I will use it for the rest of my life. I've met so many slippery whores, and I just never could articulate it. Now I can.
No, you just didn't have the right language for it, and there it is. So they get divorced. There's all these allegations going back and forth. She writes this op-ed piece, calls herself. What does she say? Oh, she says about herself that she was the public figure representing domestic abuse based on her experience during this time period, which is the time period she was with Johnny Depp.
And in many ways that's true. Because, in many domestic situations, there is no clear good person or bad person, because it's all personal. It's all based on feelings, and everybody says all sorts of inflammatory things. I think both Johnny and Amber are a unique brand of special in the way that they interacted and communicated with each other, because the language of it all is really, but maybe not, right? And so, and what do you do in those situations, and how do you handle it? I think in some ways it's a really good example of how messy and complicated and terrible the whole thing is. But on the other hand, it doesn't serve anyone's purposes really well, because it's so messy, right? You can't say, oh, here is this innocent victim, Amber Heard, who was abused by this guy, right? And then, you also can't say, oh, here, poor Johnny Depp, someone was, this gold digger came after him and ruined his life type thing. Like, no.
It's the textbook definition of a toxic relationship. There's accountability and ownership on both ends, where there's other domestic violence cases where you clearly have an aggressor, abuser, and a victim, right? That you can't, water it down to a toxic relationship, but it's so evident. And the level of his demeanor in this, like it appears that he's making no apologies or having any level of remorse for any level of the role that he played
Yes.
in.
Okay, so
And I'm sure he's being advised not to do that.
And we have to start off by saying, like, assault does not belong in any relationship unless there's a safe word, and that's a different world altogether. But just hard stop. Nobody should be assaulting anyone. Like, no.
Right.
So let me ask you this, Jessica, because this is really where what do you think the point of all this is? Do you think who do you believe one person over the other?
I think that I think Johnny Depp felt pushed into a corner where it was his only option to reclaim his name and his status. So after he lost in the UK, I, along with a lot of people, really thought we're Team Amber, right? Like, okay, like the process proved that he had guilt, and more things came out about maybe some of his lifestyle choices and just shed a new light on him, but so severe that it cost him significant roles, partnerships with big, Hollywood, whatever, crumbled. And so I felt like he was backed into this corner where he felt possibly like, no, I have to at least get my side out there. And I mean, clearly this trial is Johnny Depp's best movie of all time. So like all the fans that kind of, jump ship are quickly coming back, mainly because of the entertainment comedy value of it. Like I was like, even the facial expressions of the judge are now memes. Like it's like I said, it is literally entertainment, and he's a good entertainer. So you can see like the demeanor and attitude really appear like he's getting a piece of his life back, with, supporters now coming out and being more vocal about it, where his, status after that UK conviction was really kind of seemed like his death sentence.
So that UK thing, and I would bet money that if Amber Heard loses on anything, there's going to be appeal based on the judge not granting was it a motion to dismiss, a motion for summary judgment? They made a motion to get rid of the case, Johnny Depp's case, because of what happened in the UK. And this is a geeky thing for attorneys because they would argue that's something called law of the case, right? This issue has already been litigated and decided by a court of law. It should be
book closed.
And so
it was one of those English courts, like no.
Yeah, and we're like, no, we we don't listen to England. So that'll be an interesting thing for legal scholars and law students and law professors to argue in the future. But that will be a big thing coming out of it, I anticipate. So, but yeah, he loses, he comes out, and I don't see. I agree with Jessica totally. I don't know about you, Casey, but the chances of either one of them winning, I think are probably pretty low, because then it just becomes like, okay, Johnny and Amber, how much money are you willing to spend to have a PR moment? And he has more to gain than she had to gain, right? Because the UK case does get tossed out. I think, at least when she published it, there was a lot up until now, there was a lot of support. Believe the woman, believe the person who's been abused. We shouldn't overly criticize or analyze that kind of stuff. And so he has, I think, more skin in the game than her. So for him, I think this is a big PR move. Right, Casey?
I think it's a PR move for both of them. He has more skin in the game only because he's more powerful. He has more money to throw at it. I think, if I'm a mediator or an attorney in this case, I'm trying to find a way so that they can both declare victory and move on. This is a good example also of why, if you have enough money, you have enough money to ruin your life. Because if this had been people at a much lower income tax bracket, like this would have went away, right? People would have been like, yeah, I hate them. I hate, we both hate each other. And then they would have, found a way to move on in their lives and stuff. But instead, they have all this money to be able to fight this out in the court of public opinion, because that's really where this is going on. This isn't about the legal case. It's all about the public opinion stuff. And, that's where it's at. I mean, I think they're both trying to save their careers in some respects, because now they're memes, right? They're icons of, they represent a thing more than themselves. And so I don't know. It's one of those things I'm like, ugh. Part of me is like, ooh, guilty pleasure. This is fun to watch people self-implode, because then I don't have to self-implode. But on the other hand, I'm like, oh, the human cost is awful. But anyway.
Pour me a mega pint. Let me digest all this. And this isn't fully related, but one of the things that has come up, and just like, as they talk about him, like losing his stuff with Disney and Pirates of the Caribbean and all that, Hollywood, I think, loves a comeback story and like that redemption piece. But that's for me, that's very unique to Hollywood. Like, if we're talking about an NFL player who's like, a starter, like the NFL's not going to drop them, even with like really legit severe accusations and causes. Like, you don't see that level of like completely like, and we're done.
Mm-hmm.
In other like high profile, lots of money, not celebrities, but I go to like athletes, and how many times athletes have really gotten away with tons until, really it's so significant that NFL has no other choice but to drop them. But it seems like there's this other level of forgiveness within those two worlds.
I think part of it is because Hollywood makes its money off of stories, and redemption is a great story. In many places in literature, there's stories of redemption like that, because we all want to believe that we can change, because we all have, I think, bad parts about ourselves, and we all want to change. But I think what's interesting is that calculus, right, of any company or group or as a society, when do we stick by our heroes and when do we toss them aside, is a really interesting, it's a very interesting question. And there's a lot of heroes, political and otherwise, that when people dig in and support and choose loyalty over perhaps principle,
Well, it's
complicated.
I saw you shaking your head a little bit when Jessica was saying the thing about athletes. Like, do you not think that athletes are given different treatment than actor is with these same sort of allegations?
I think it depends on the issue. I think that athletes are definitely given special treatment. But for example, look at Colin Kaepernick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't take much and he was jettisoned, right? Then you watch, so I think, definitely in our country, race has a big issue, is a big part of it. When you deal with O.J. Simpson and how that sort of changed and where that went in different places and things. So, when you layer all those other things over it, I don't know. I'd have to look at it and see where it is. I think Lance Armstrong is another interesting one. Yeah. Like, how long do people stay by him? But then, at what point what's the tipping point? So I think, depending on the issue and depending on the athlete and the sport, right? Mm-hmm. Because if a sport markets itself as this wholesome, our players are heroes type thing, then I think it's the tipping point might be earlier than other sports where we're like, yeah, we know they're sort of, they're good at what they do, but they don't expect them to be some sort of paragon of human virtue type thing. But I think if it's that wholesome value thing, then you have to jettison them really quickly. I think Olympic athletes deal with this all the time. Look at all the athlete, with the Olympics, there are a lot of athletes that dealt with that this last Olympic Games, where it was like tiny little things and like, boom, they were gone.
Yeah. Well, and maybe level of evidence. Like, if we can watch a video that is so incriminating, then it pushes their versus hearsay or other things like that. But no, that's a good point. It just seems so inconsistent, I guess.
Oh,
right? Like,
there's no consistency there.
Ever.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's timing. I think a lot of it has to do with timing. I do think that there's a lot to 10 years ago. If it happened, it's less of an issue. If Johnny Depp's coming off of like the biggest blockbuster of all time, and they're going to cancel the sequel to it. Maybe it's not happening.
Right.
You know, I think there's so many factors, and it is. I think the only thing that you can say is consistent is that it is inconsistent.
Right.
And does the company, the organization that's making that decision, can they make more money getting rid of the person, or can they make more money keeping the person?
Yeah.
And that's probably
Right.
the other consistent.
Right there.
Yeah.
That's the decision.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're Disney, you're like, do we make more money keeping him or getting rid of him?
Right.
Yeah.
Do we know any other drunk pirates?
Right. Or do I have another athlete that can perform like this one? Right.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
so it's like, do I have an option of a replacement here?
Yeah, a practice squad player is not going to get the same treatment as your star cornerback. No.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No, it's also crazy to think how much money is poured into these, like how much money all of those lawyers, like the whole, it's just, if we knew the real number, we would just fall over, I think.
Yeah.
Like recently in one of them, they were interviewing one of Johnny Depp's friends and asking about like gifts that he had received from Johnny Depp. And they're like, you know, in total of like $8,500. And the guy's response was like, oh, I've gotten a lot more than that from Johnny Depp, like $8,500. Have you met him? No, maybe for one gift, but that for adding up the gifts, it's much higher than that. And like he just laughs at it, and it's just like, oh my goodness, like it's just crazy.
So I have a question for you, because I don't know as much about sports as I do about maybe movie people and stuff, but there's also been another like recent pile on and jettison from a group. Have you guys been following the Madison Hawthorne story?
No.
Who's that?
So Madison Hawthorne is a 26-year-old congressperson from North Carolina. He is he's an incredibly conservative, at least his brand and those who he associates with and stuff. Well, recently he had made some allegations about other Republicans, like basically cocaine fueled orgies, like which most people are like, well, that's what Washington D.C. does, right? Whatever. But he sort of did it, but then sort of implicated like Republicans. Well, and you have seen all of a sudden all of this dirt on him has surfaced, and he is being like, boom, like the bus is back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And he's like, they are like, he is like on the outs. And of course, you know, he's trying to resurrect his personal image on Twitter as much as he possibly can. He did say, my favorite one is he said, you know, it's not really fair that you're digging up dirt from my early 20s and da 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 da. I'm like, he's 26. Like your early 20s were like 2 years ago, buddy. Like, really?
If your early 20s to now was just before COVID.
Speaking of changing, you know, and like how inconsistent things are, when is all of a sudden a politician's life over or political life over with scandal? Because that is completely unpredictable.
Oh
like,
yeah.
my gosh. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. So now that you mentioned it, I kind of do remember seeing some of the stuff about that. Is this the guy he's in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I do remember seeing some of this on the news. I don't know what other people think, but I've kind of what you alluded to, Casey. I always assumed that that's what they did in DC. Like, yeah. Like there's just so
make sense.
There's just so many things that have come out over the years that just supporting that. You're like, well, okay, that's old news, buddy. What do we? Did you hear about any of that, Jessica?
No, but like I live in Colorado, and so there's like similar scandals with like leaders of churches, especially like the big, huge churches down in Colorado Springs and stuff. And they have been like, and then there's zero forgiveness, redemption possible. And everyone who once, you know, or shouting their name from rooftops in support, completely pull back. And, I think what you said about like, there's a piece of all of us that love that comeback story, because we like, there's moments and things in our lives that we want grace and forgiveness as well. But I do feel like there is this level of responsibility when you sign on to take on a role, like you also are opening up yourself to that. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but this pop singer who doesn't want to be a role model, that's too bad.
Not your decision.
That you like, how did you go into that not thinking that people were going to dig or be inquisitive? And not to say you have to live a perfect life, but to assume that you get this level of privacy along with it is kind of asinine to me. Like, I'm not in any large public thing. So yes, I definitely expect a level of privacy within my life, but I'm not putting myself out there. So
you do know that I put this on the internet, right?
Don't worry, I'm not sharing it with anyone. But like, even just schmucks with social media, right? Like, if you're gonna go on Facebook and talk about your relationship, right? And you're gonna tell, oh, this is our 3-month anniversary, and like, ooh, we got to do this. Whoa, what a special dude! And then all of a sudden, crickets. Bullshit. We need to know what happened. So why are we talking about him anymore? Like, there's a level of like, you can't throw all that out there. And then I'm just supposed to like J-Lo and A-Rod not know what happened and went down. That's bullshit. That's anticlimactic. I feel like you owe us something, right? If I'm giving you likes and love and reading that shit, better follow up with the final chapter with me.
I agree. Let's know. What did happen with J-Lo and A-Rod? Right.
We were all so invested, and now nothing.
Although I don't spend a lot of time looking
into this new relationship.
Were that invested? Like, really?
I was. Yeah, that's the
I'm always rooting for J-Lo.
Right.
Oh, she's great, but one commentator said J-Lo loves to be in love, and I'm like, yep. And I'm like, you know what? More power to her for that.
Yep. It's a fair statement.
And I love to watch J-Lo in love. You're like, I don't know how this is going to end because I see precedent, but hey, I'm rooting for you.
Talk about cutting people off. She has nailed that down.
So she actually got married once, though, didn't she? She actually went through and got married because she wasn't married to A-Rod, right?
No, she's been married like multiple times. She was married
Mark
to
Anthony.
Yeah.
I know that because I follow her very, very.
But she like early on in her career, she married like one of her backup dancers. So she's gone through a few, certainly lots of engagements.
Well, backup dancers are kind of where it's at. Mariah Carey has one she likes a lot.
Yes. Yeah. That's an interesting dynamic too.
Oh, Mariah Carey? I love her. I love her brand.
I know. Did you watch the documentary of how, like, because she was dating that like billionaire, right, and engaged, but then this
the head of the
little
record
backup
label?
singer snuck his way up in there for sure. That's a true romance. I would just like to wrap up the Johnny Depp thing, which I'm gonna just put out this prediction, which would be super epic, that Amber Heard and Johnny Depp get back together. I see like, wouldn't that be the ultimate conclusion to all of this? Oh, I'm waiting for it.
Yeah.
What?
Talk about nails in both of their coffins. That would do it.
You put us through all that and now you're back together?
No, I have a better one. They should co-star in Mr. and Mrs. Smith too.
Yes. Either or. I'm all in for it.
The script is already written.
Let's do it.
There's going to be defecation in beds. There's going to be fight. There's going to be bruises. There's going to be which makeup covers up bruises better. And can you please tell me the brand? Thank you.
Yeah.
All of that. It's going to
The
be
script has already been
Make a
written.
pint.
Well,
I
it's
can't wait for it.
after that Will Smith, Chris Rock things. There was a tweet out there that somebody said, if they come out with a buddy cop movie in 3 weeks, I'm going to be pissed off. Like, we all assume that these big controversial things, and I think maybe it's a Kardashian effect where there's all this controversy just before the new season of the Kardashians to get everybody to go watch, right? Well, I don't want to move away from it quite yet because I want to ask Casey about the attorneys in the case, because that's what I've seen making more headlines or just as big a headlines as anything else, is the how well they've done or how poorly, well, more so how poorly some of Amber Heard's attorneys have done. Do you have an opinion on the attorney's performance, Jessica?
It's definitely pretty painful to watch. I mean, the one time that he went to strike something,
He
and
objected
it was
to his own question. Yeah.
objected to his own question. I mean, you just like the pressure just on how public it is and everything must just be so incredibly daunting that human error is inevitable. So like, while hilarious, deep down, it's so cringeworthy that I just like feel for him and his mom. Like, oh man, that must suck for your mom just as much as it does for you.
Well,
Yeah.
go ahead, Casey.
Opinion, Ryan, because I haven't watched any of it. I just
okay.
can't. Like, it's one of those things where I'm like, oof.
Why?
And I'm like,
why is that? Why can't you watch it? Because
half the world is.
I think it's because I mean, the actual train wreck, I want to hear people talking about the train wreck. I don't want to watch it in real time. And also, I think the attorneys have their reward. They're getting all of the notoriety and whatever. And I work as an attorney every day. I don't need to like watch someone else do something sort of similar to me. Like, I don't know, maybe that's narcissistic of me. I don't know. Or maybe that's just because I'm at capacity with attorney stuff. I just think that in some ways, like, this is why attorneys get bad names in the public, because number one, attorneys are not good at explaining what we do, especially in a case like this, to the general public about how that works. And then also, when you take something where you take the words and the text and everybody watching, Joe Public, they know what those things mean, but you have to break it down to be like absolutely clear in a court of law. So it seems comical. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, does that attorney not know what that meant? But you have, so you have to like do that. And it becomes sort of this farcical like thing that I'm like, it's just not, I don't know. I don't enjoy that. I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go again. But anyway,
for me, sometimes it like hits too close. It's like, oh, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Like, I can see myself making that same mistake. Holy crap.
Yeah.
And I think to the general public, like, that's so stupid. But you don't realize that attorney, maybe he's just an idiot. I don't know. But maybe what I suspect happened is his brain is full of more information about this case than anybody can ever imagine. And he's thinking not just about what's happening now, but where he needs to go and where he needs to go after that and after that and after that. And probably the better, like in that situation, Jessica, that you said, maybe the objection should have been non-responsive. I asked the question and it was non-responsive to what I asked, but he said the thing that attorneys say a lot in court, which is objection hearsay. And that was his own question. And probably, like I said, probably should have come up with a different objection. But I feel for him. Like, even if he looks like an idiot and I can laugh about it, there's a part of me that's like, oh.
Right. Oh, on another level too, Ryan, I think you're right. Like, first of all, it's really hard what they're doing. To perform like a job in that type of environment is incredibly stressful, but it is their job. But the other thing where I really feel for them is when you read the texts and you know what happened, or at least as much as we do. Now consider yourself the attorney and you have to represent those people. Like that's your client. that's how they think, that's how they speak. You have to make the best arguments you can for them. That's a big job. Like,
Yeah.
you take your clients as you find them, for sure. That's what attorneys do. But like, some clients are easier to represent than others. I will just say, right? Because you're like,
Right.
it's always fun as an attorney when you're like, okay, we've got this plan, we're going to do this. And then something comes out of your client's mouth and you're like,
what?
I don't know if I've ever heard that before. Where did that come from? And then your next question is like, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
If you've had a client in any sort of like situation where there's conflict, like, I mean, there's transactional type attorneys where they're whatever, but if you're like a trial attorney or something, you have had a client come up with something out of left field and then turn to look at you like, what did I do? And you're like, other than ruin the case, I don't know what you just did.
Can I ask you guys this question? What decides of a like trial being open to the public versus being closed?
Well,
right? Like,
they're open. So I think probably what you're asking is, when do they allow cameras and when do they not allow cameras?
right.
Because trials by default are open to the public, right?
Okay.
It's just a matter of space and letting people in or out.
Like logistics.
Yeah. Unless it's maybe some family court matters, things
With
that minors and juveniles, those might be closed to the public. But it really depends on the judge.
Really?
Yeah. If there's a request made by media to be present, it's going to be up to the judge.
Yeah. Like, I wonder if this judge totally is regretful about not closing it, because it seems like it's just a circus.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just,
I think
it really doesn't even look real. It's like, is this really the laughter and the it's just next level.
Well, and that could be any number of reasons, but one of them could be, do you really want to litigate with all of the media in the country about whether or not you should? Because they have lawyers too, right? So that's all of a sudden you might just be like, I'll let you in because I just can't deal with it.
Got it.
And two, if you're an elected judge, you're going to be famous.
Mm-hmm.
Not that judges are ever like that and want any notoriety.
Well, so after the OJ thing, the Judge Ito, which there's very few judges other than the ones that I've worked with that I remember, right? But I remember Judge Ito from the OJ Simpson. And I don't think he came out of that, my impression, I don't remember now, but my impression was that he didn't come out of it looking too great. And so I think maybe there was a tendency for judges to not allow that sort of public spectacle sort of thing going on. I know the Supreme Court, it comes up all the time. They want to put cameras in the Supreme Court to show arguments there. And they're just like, nope. And for good reason. And
it seems like it complicates it. Like, you should be your integrity and performing your job. You should not care who sees it. There should be some level of televisability with it. But it's hard to not see that it's a difficult thing to navigate when you already have a really difficult task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing is that part of the principles upon which our justice system is based is that you are publicly tried in a court with with a juror of your peers. Like, the publicity is part of it, because that's the transparency we're trying to have in government. It's just different now, where it used to be at the courthouse and it was limited on who could be there because of the size of the room and different things. But public trials still happened. But now with televising and it can go out to the world, then it's a complicated question.
Well,
private and quiet and stuff. I mean, Russia does that really well. So
well, so I imagine that when there's the issue of cameras in the courtroom comes up, Johnny Depp wasn't fighting that. I don't know if Amber Heard's attorneys were fighting it or not, but that plays a role too. Is what do the parties, what are they going to say about it or not? And if they don't say anything about it, or if they're like, yeah, we want them there, then it's probably more likely they're going to be there than not.
Yeah. And the judge like, oh,
Yeah, nobody, I mean, come on, who wants to do their job in front of, millions and millions of people and have it clipped and replayed at nauseum
Yeah.
on the
yeah.
internet
Well,
for now forever, right?
meet
Right.
millions of people who have no idea, many of whom, the most of whom, almost all of whom probably have no idea the rules under which you operate or even how to do your job. They're just going to give you their opinion based on their life experience, which is not that of a judge. Like it's,
This
judging
isn't
is
like Law and Order.
not no, right. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I want to clarify, like, I know people are like calling out sick to stay home to watch this trial. And I just want to clarify, I've watched this trial through TikTok. So my only contributions have been through clips of TikTok because I have a job that I don't get to call out on. And so it's not a luxury I have, but if I could get on my couch with a bowl of popcorn
right.
and watch it all day, that sounds like heaven. Sounds like some great self-care. But I also don't work in that field. So like for me, it's literally like watching a Johnny Depp movie is.
It's probably way more entertaining than the average trial is by far.
Yeah, most trials are boring.
Yeah, and I heard somebody, somebody told me, they're like, oh, there's just so much time when they're like at the judge's table and there's all this discussion. I'm like, yeah, because they're doing their job. They're working. They're not
right.
They're not there for entertainment. They're not looking to hit all the right beats to make you laugh. They're not telling jokes out there. But
right.
And kind of one of the last things that I wanted to hit about it, what do you think of the performance that you've seen so far of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, like how they're presenting themselves in court?
I mean, if this is
there's
not
a winner there.
Development, I mean, first of all, so Johnny Depp really does talk like that. Like, are you American? Like, where did you get this accent, Johnny Depp? Like, for me, that the pausing and the like, all of that is so crazy. And then, I mean, Amber should get an Oscar or an Emmy, more appropriate. The soul, like, I mean, she is committed to that very, I don't know what you call it, flat affect, deer in headlights look persona that she throws out there. But I mean, it feels like they are just locked into their role, but they are also advised by their lawyers, yes, on how to present themselves in court, right?
Yeah, I think, go ahead though, Casey. Do you have any opinion on this? No?
Nope.
Well, I think that I think from the court of public opinion, like he comes across as more
arrogant.
No, I think he comes off as more like you understand him more approachable, more okay, more, I don't know if relatable is the right word, but you're like, oh, okay, he's more entertaining to watch. He comes across as more interesting than her. That sullen affect, like you're saying, I think at times it betrays her when they come out with certain information, because it's just like, why are you a robot to some of this stuff, right? So I think it depends, and but he comes off very charismatic, I think, and so I think maybe people will gravitate to him. But then she hasn't presented her case yet, right?
Right.
Maybe things switch. I mean, we're at a point in this when it's scheduled for a long time. Like, how was it, 6 weeks or something? Yeah, a long time, and so there's going to be a point where she's going to get up there, and I assume that the other side comes in. This is not an uncommon thing in trials where, after the plaintiff or the prosecution goes, you're thinking, well, this is a slam dunk. How can they ever refute that? And then the other side comes out and you're like, well, that's how. Right. So we haven't seen, there's more to tell about this for sure.
We've gotten half of it.
Yeah. Yeah. But So far so good. I think if the judge were to just say we're throwing out both cases tomorrow, probably I think Johnny Depp got everything out of this that he's wanted, which is
Yep.
to just say she said these things about me, but
She's,
you
I
might
think
think
his
I'm a
biggest
bad
thing
guy,
is
but this was not a one person being right and one person being wrong. It's a messy relationship.
right. And I mean, I think that's the thing is that she's not innocent in this. It seems like the number one priority for him is to reclaim some of his status and his partnerships and just his perception or our perception of who he is, and he has enough money to be able to do something like this. But I also don't think he's completely innocent in it. I mean, they seem like they're two different levels of crazy, and together it was just
A very
toxic.
toxic
I
relationship.
mean, if this would be not like if they didn't have money, none of this would be transpiring. It would have been a messy relationship with a messy breakup, right?
Right.
And so I feel like it's domestic violence is a really, really, really serious thing. And so like if there's any concern of it being so public, is that it's watering down the severity and the seriousness that can be. So making false claims like that, she really should be held accountable if that is in fact the truth. So if it whittles down to that, like, I just think of women who are and men who are real survivors of domestic violence, and I wonder what their perception of all of this is, because
Right.
it could be making light of something that's really, really, really serious. So we'll see. We can laugh. We can, pull out these little sound bites of some bullshit and do that. But at the end of the day, like, it is discussing a fairly serious matter.
All right, Casey, do you have any parting words or any other thoughts or any other topics you wanted to do today?
Well, something I want to talk about next time, because it's related to what I have to do right now. I have to go barbecue 45 pounds of marinated chicken. We can talk about potluck etiquette, and we can stay tuned. But related to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard,
take pictures. I want to see pictures of all
okay.
this.
I want a study commissioned of how frequent before and after this case are candy bars left in beds part of the chaos.
If you want to call me a prude, that's okay. I have certain things that I frown upon.
It'll be the prank of this next decade.
There's some people like, he said that like it's a bad thing.
Indeed.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
I support a discussion on potlucks because they've definitely been on hiatus in our, pandemic world. So now that we are getting out of it, I can see those making a comeback, and certainly have been part of quite a few. So
oh yeah,
I fully support that discussion.
A potluck discussion, a big thing, because I have been a participant in and a organizer of and an executor of many large gatherings where lots of food is eaten. So we'll put it on the list, and that's what we'll discuss next time. And all right, guys, thanks a lot.
Sweet.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.